Part 6. This is better than sex, lovebirds. Leader's voice crackled over the headset. Time to grease some crawlers. I'm proceeding down shaft 16A to 17C. Points found alien entrance to their last reported atrocity, and it's a cakewalk to the hive. Rat reports an open airlock at 69er 8G. No apparent cause. She's closing in on Richard's projected hive site upon my order. Lock your view screens down. Leader flipped his own goggles down over his eyes. A pre-programmed map of the airlock and floor plan flared into view, a grid pattern overlaying the corridor he was about to hustle down. He shook his head to snap into it. The sense of dislocation gave, and his training asserted itself. Lock and load, move it out, Leader ordered. I'll be moving in behind you once we get Shitkicker into position. Where is this room? Richards asked. Operating theatre here, Ears replied, pointing out its position on the grid map. Point has already moved on. Looks like your guess was right. He and Rat are closing in on the same position, this engineering sector. What were they doing with these bodies? Richards whispered to himself. Clearly they were studying the gestation period, but what? He tapped the monitor screen. The image paused on the IV-riddled cocoon. Were they up to? Leader's voice cut the reverie. Richards, report! Watch yourselves, Sergeant. This resembles aspects of the Matelab XX incident too closely. I think our team of doctors was engaging in some inappropriate research. Any sign of the hostiles yet? Ears interjected. Negative, sir. On your toes, Sergeant. Be as wary of the staff here as you are of the aliens. Affirmative. Out. Richard's eyes had never left the monitor. He brought his finger up to the dead surgeon's hand, rapping the screen softly. Give me as sharp a colour printout of this section as you can, Ears. He cruelly proffered. This is significant. Order one of Kotlow's staff to enter and retrieve a sample of this substance from the operating theatre. I'll need a clear monitor to study the tapes from the pharmaceutical safe when you get a chance. Rat sat in the dim light, staring across the open airlock. The sound of activity at the far end of the duct, perhaps a quarter of a mile away, kept her stationary. Suddenly, the light from the corridor below flickered. Shh, Leader, she cautioned. Rat looked over the rim of the opening. Leader had indeed heard her. They're ahead of us, she whispered. Close enough to hear our radios. On my own now. On your orders. Affirmative. So ordered, Leader whispered. How you stomach them taking you, I'll never know. No different than any man, she replied, looking away. Leader shook his head. He glanced down the corridor, towards the hive's probable location. His steady flex rocked into his shoulder as he glanced up at Rat, tipping his right hand to his brow. Rat did likewise, and Leader was gone, stealthily moving back well out of hearing of the hostiles. He would be back for her soon enough, to snatch her from the jaws of hell. Rat inspected the airlock. Unbroken, running between the open floor of the conduit and the ceiling of the corridor, were a pair of heating pipes. She tentatively touched them, biting her lip. Not a peep from you, little girl, so as not to make a sound. They were hot, very hot. Steam, perhaps, or heated chemicals, better yet. Rat reached behind her and freed a loop of hair wire filament from her belt. She methodically unwound the loop, all the while stealing glances down the duct, where the wet sounds of movement continued without interruption. Ahead of you, Point, Ears reported. 200 yards, 2 hostiles with a war party beyond them. Yo, Jiminy. Point flattened against the wall, flicking the booster on his pulse rifle. Virgin action, about to lose its cherry. Sit tight, all move on Rat's signal. Set to private comm and tell me a story, Jiminy. Point heard the click, and the Near's voice caressed him like honey, now soft and melodic, his and his alone. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I will fear no evil. The file fell and scattered over the floor. The shakes overtook Kotlow as he sealed the door to his office. The spasm started in his gut, threatening a grand mal-seizure unless he contained it. He fumbled for the bottle in his coat pocket. Frantically, he tore the cap loose and shook out a handful of pills, gulping them all down. They were bitter, but the rush of bile up his throat was worse. And then the craving for the jelly. It was all he could do to swallow. Kotlow rolled his sleeve down and studied his arm. The straps were tight enough to bite into the skin, which was already beginning to discolour from the effects of the overdosing. He bent his elbow, feeling the sliding of the needle as the motion nudged it deeper into his vein. No matter. It was barely visible under the folds of cloth. If he were careful, even the lieutenant wouldn't take note of it. Kotlow ran his tongue over his teeth. The sweet residue of the jelly was fading, already a memory. The X-rays were positioned over the light table. The dark mass in the abdomen had grown. It was nearly full term. All was well. If only he could maintain this pace and keep her dormant for another 17 hours, all would be well. Nurse Jaffrey's voice broke the silence. Dr. Kotlow, the analysis of the final list of patients has been completed. They are cleared for military deboarding procedures. Kotlow rubbed the back of his neck, his fingers checking the filament that creased his hairline and fed minuscule dosages of another nervous system control regent into his system. The touch urged another rush into his cortex. He shivered at the jolt, struggling to maintain his composure. Yes, well, continue, Jaffrey. What of the nursery? The McCormick infant remains. Should we? He cannot be moved at this time, nurse. I've wired the appropriate information to the authorities. Sir, the military... Kotlow flickered perceptibly, his eyes locked with hers. See to it, he hissed. I'm not to be interrupted for the next 15 minutes. He cut off the reply, even as it came, and lost interest in her before she had moved to go. The X-rays were still of interest, but he could not maintain his concentration. His eyes were focusing correctly, no telltale dilation. The lenses and eye drops would stabilize any indication of his real state. But there was no correcting the inner eye, stoned on synthesized opiates, stimulants, and the blessed jelly. Kotlow massaged his temples and tipped his head back, to the side, forward. Maintain, protect. The imperative asserted itself. In the blue light of the X-rays, his face seemed touched by her immaculate light. His skin glowed with azure perfection, basking in the sensation, cobalt eyes unblinkingly fixed on the dark, fetal shape in the abdomen that lay exposed before him. After a final study, Kotlow snapped the X-rays down one by one, tucking them under his arm. When the light board was cleared, he carried the films over to the waste disposal chute and unceremoniously dumped them. Kotlow coiled out of the room. In the darkness, the X-rays spun leisurely down. They reflected the dim light like slippery, weightless mirrors. Softly, they settled upon the mass of papers, tissues, emptied pharmaceutical blister packs, and dry debris. A new strata was added to the station's disposable history, riddled with Kotlow's fingerprints.